another edition of Radio Free USA, your unofficially official voice of the resistance. I'm your host for the week, Rahul, and joining us as always on the other line, we have our good buddy Tim. How you doing, man? How's the week going?
Good. It's been an eventful week, to say the least.
Oh my God, absolutely. We will get to that shortly. And I'm proud to say that we have a special correspondence report from the land down under. We have Tarek. He sought asylum and I think has been accepted.
G'day, mates. I'm down here in Australia. Although I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here, guys, because as you know, last week, the Australian PM, Malcolm Turnbull, was visiting Trump in D.C. And recently, I think it was yesterday, Trump tweeted at 3 a.m. that Turnbull better hope there's no tape of him being peed on by a kangaroo. And the condition was that I get deported from Australia back to the States. But we'll see. I'll try to stay a few more days. But
that is some compelling blackmail. I'm not sure how long you'll be able to stay with that kind of dirt on the PM there. And as Tim mentioned, we've had quite an eventful week, and almost, I would say, overwhelmingly eventful week for one subject in particular that I think we're going to focus on for basically the entire show, which is the Russia investigation and how it ties to the administration and the FBI. And Tim, you want to give us a little recap of some of the events that have been going on this week?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the big news is Trump fired the director of the FBI, James Comey. More specifically, he fired the person who was investigating him, or the head of the agency that was investigating him for colluding with the Russians, which makes it a whole lot more significant, right? If you fire the head of the FBI, that's already a big deal. But when you fire the head of the FBI and the FBI happens to be investigating the president for colluding with the Russians, that's a much bigger deal. So the way it happened was strange, to say the least. As most things go with Donald Trump. On Tuesday afternoon, he had his personal bodyguard deliver a termination letter to Comey's office. And Comey at the time was actually in LA doing an FBI training conference or something. So he was actually speaking to a group of people when he saw the news on a TV that happened to be in the room that he had been fired, which you can imagine would be quite an embarrassing occurrence.
And I'll just want to quickly interject to plug that if this were under different circumstances, this would be a hilarious conclusion to last week's Clown of the Week, where we nominated James Comey, and for him to find out that he just got fired on a TV screen while he's giving a speech is fittingly hilarious. However, there are so many other things that make this more disturbing. So I'm very conflicted about how I feel about that.
I think we just won the triple crown of Clown of the Weeks, guys. That's 3 weeks in a row, 4 weeks in a row, where our Clown of the Week has unceremoniously suffered deleterious consequences.
Yeah, we deserve a pat on the back.
I think Clown of the Week is kind of like being on the cover of Madden.
The Madden curse.
Or it's like the movie The Ring, the horror movie. Like once you see that videotape, you're going to die in 7 days. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, exactly. Final Destination. There's loads of comparisons.
Right. So I just at this point I just want to point out that it may seem hypocritical that we are upset about the firing of Comey, because we labeled him as clown last week, and that's what Trump was hoping, is like he was thinking. The Democrats don't like Comey, so it's going to be okay if I fire him. But that's not true at all, because we're okay with Comey being fired if Hillary is president and can replace Comey with somebody who's going to be non-biased and reasonable. But we're not okay with it if Trump gets to replace them. and we're not okay with it if that person is currently investigating Trump. So there's a big distinction there, and just want to point that out because
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And if anything, logically, we'd only be hypocrites if we were calling for Comey to be fired in October. Where I think I certainly didn't call for that. Although I thought he was a clown for writing the infamous letter a couple days before the election that he was reopening the election, the investigation into Clinton. But firing the FBI director was something that is just so uncouth in DC that Democrats are totally legitimate for calling him out on this.
Yeah, no, it's a distinction between kind of respecting the rule of the law and checks and balances between the executive branch and and those that are meant to keep them in control and within reasonable bounds. I mean, the idea even back when the Hillary email thing happened. I mean, yeah, we were all yelling about how clownish the activity was and how he stepped over his boundaries in doing that. But at the same time, I think just the idea of just saying like, oh well, I'm going to get rid of the FBI director. I'm going to fucking get rid of the Supreme Court. I'll get rid of whoever stands in my way is just like fundamentally undemocratic.
Yeah, and also I would point out that the circumstances now are much different than the circumstances were last October and July when all this the Hillary email stuff was happening. Right at this point, the FBI's investigation into collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians is the most promising investigation that we have into those that collusion. So clearly, it's a totally different situation, right? Back in October and July, we didn't even know that. I mean, we had suspicion that Trump was colluding with the Russians, but we didn't know for sure. And I mean, we still don't know for sure, I guess. But it wasn't a big deal back then. We didn't know that there was no FBI investigation that we knew of. But clearly circumstances have changed.
They have changed, and Hillary was being accused of like grossly, not incompetence, but
reckless.
Reckless decision making in terms of having a private server, whereas Trump is really being accused at its core of treason. Okay, so like that, there are massive differences in these two investigations, and I think firing Comey now, and guys, the one thing, sorry, that we didn't mention in all this, and we brought up Hillary, is that their rationale was that he was too hard on Hillary. That's why they fired him.
Yeah, so I was about to get to that. So in the letter of termination that Trump sent to Comey, that he had his bodyguard deliver, he had a little line saying, "I greatly appreciate you informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation. I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the bureau." So there was that line in there that made a lot of people scratch their heads. And then there was also the attachment. He said, "Okay, refer to these attachments for the real reason that I fired you." And the attachments were letters from Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein, both recommending the firing of Comey. And the letter from Rosenstein was longer and included what they claim was the explanation for the firing, which was Hillary's emails, as Tarek mentioned. So Rosenstein and Sessions basically did Trump a solid and helped him out and wrote these letters to support his case.
Yeah, and what's interesting with the Rosenstein case a little bit is that he's the deputy attorney general, and as we know, Jeff Sessions is supposed to have been recusing himself from the Russia investigation due to his previous contacts with Ambassador Kislyak. So it was kind of like set upon the deputy AG Rosenstein to justify what's going on, and from all accounts, from kind of experts in the field and kind of the legal kind of experts in the law and in the Justice Department, this guy Rod Rosenstein is like not a bad dude. He's actually like apparently a pretty honorable, like moderate guy. And I think if we read that dismissal, that explanation of the dismissal in a vacuum outside of the Trump, the Trump world of knowing that he's trying to cover his own tracks for this investigation. If this was in the Hillary Clinton administration and this same guy was, presented this letter, it actually would sound pretty reasonable. Like James Comey did fuck up in the Hillary Clinton email thing, and Rosenstein mentions that like if you're not going to press charges against someone, it doesn't make sense to make derogatory comments to them as well. So the explanation makes sense, but it's in service of an end that Trump is just trying to cover his own tracks and stop the investigation. So unfortunately, this guy Rosenstein is kind of a patsy. He put a reasonable explanation to something that's actually an unreasonable action or something.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and Trump confirmed this actually. So this kind of brings me to another big piece of news, which is just the fact that their explanation in this letter and also from Trump's spokespeople did not jive at all with what Trump told Lester Holt in an interview on Thursday.
Infamous Lester Holt interview.
The infamous Lester Holt interview. I think this interview may go down in history because Trump clearly did not consult with his lawyers before this interview because he was just...
Does he ever consult with anyone? I think this is just par for the course. It's like, well, of course what he says contradicts what everyone else has been saying because he doesn't prepare for these things. He doesn't give a shit.
He's too busy inventing terms like prime the pump and things like that. He doesn't have time to consult with his lawyers.
Yeah, no, you're right. He doesn't. He clearly doesn't consult with anyone. But I don't know. I figure like at least his spokespeople must have told him like what the story was going to be, right? Like, do you think he just wasn't paying attention when they told them, or do you think he is actually just trying to make? Is he just trying to make his spokespeople look like a fool?
I think what happened here was that Trump, he's a narcissist, and we know this. So he didn't want anybody to get any attention. Like, I think he was probably, like, my gut's telling me he wanted to take credit for this from the beginning. Like, it's the Apprentice model, right? Like, he wanted to go out there and be like, "You're fired," and it's because you did such a bad job on this week's competition. But then I'm assuming his counsel said, no, you can't do that. We got to, blame this on somebody else, like a normal politician would. And that's why they tried to blame it on Rothstein and Sessions in the letter, right? But at the same time, Trump, when he's left to his own devices in a freewheeling, unhinged interview with Lester Holt, just comes out there and says, "No, it was me. It was me all along. I deserve all the credit for this."
Yeah, I guess to his credit, he is pretty straightforward with when his people try to handle him and say, "Let's polish this and make this like acceptable to the American people." He's like, "No, fuck that. Like I did the thing. I'm fucking guilty." Like, yeah, whether it's this or even going back last year, like when he's in that fraud trial and blames the judge for being Mexican for that's the reason why that he was receiving some negative treatment. Like all these things, like his lawyers would tell him, "Don't say that," and he's just like, "Fuck that. I don't care. I get away with everything. I'm a brilliant con man.
I'm a celebrity. That's true.
I mean,
you can do whatever you want."
That's why his supporters love him, I guess, right? That's what they always say when they're asked in interviews. They say, "Oh, he speaks his mind. He talks like me. He's not polished."
He speaks his mind, exactly. And could I just make, because I referenced Prime the Pump earlier, so do our listeners know what we're talking about here? How there was the infamous, in addition to the infamous Lester Holt interview this week, there was the interview with The Economist, right? The Economist magazine, okay? And Trump said, "Do you know this phrase, Prime the Pump?" Yeah, I like invented that like 3 hours ago. Okay, and prime the pump, of course, is an economic term from the early 20th century. So, and the irony here is that he's saying this to The Economist, and at the same time, I just got to get in one low blow here to Trump, because I mentioned Billy Bush and Access Hollywood. Coincidentally, Prime the Pump was the name of the strip club that him and Billy Bush went to after the Access Hollywood interview. So I just that's a story that you won't get in the MSN. So
nice, Tarek. Thanks for that.
I don't want to picture anyone priming Trump's pump.
Okay, so let's move on. So I never even really detailed what he said in the Lester Holt interview. So the big thing that came out of it is he seemingly admitted to obstruction of justice in the interview. And at SNL pointed this out in hilarious fashion last night with Michael Che playing the part of Lester Holt. But Trump says, and I quote, and in fact, he's talking about firing Comey, he says, and in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won. So yeah. I think that tells you pretty much all you need to know about this case. I mean, he's basically admitting that the Russia investigation and his belief that it is a hoax and a made-up story was what caused him to fire Jim Comey.
If that would actually hold water, if Trump had even a shred of competence, he would use the line of, well, Comey clearly is incompetent, can't be trusted, totally botched the investigation to Hillary's emails. There was really no story there. And he went on and said that he was going to reopen the investigation before the election. If you follow that logic and you buy that, right, Trump has to accept that he was a hypocrite at the time, during the time of the election, right? But if you use that one, it would justify him firing Comey, because you could say, actually, this is a non-story, and it's just Comey going on again about the Wiener emails, right? And that's why I fired him, to bring somebody else in. Because if the American people really are concerned about collusion, then we got to get a legitimate guy in there to do the investigation. That would have been the better explanation. But of course, Trump is a dumbass.
Right. And that was what Rosenstein was going for. Rosenstein and Sessions. They were like, yeah, we found a legitimate reason that you can use to fire this guy. Please use this. And he said, no, I'm gonna make up my own reason.
Yeah, exactly. Just the sloppiness of it is kind of amusing, even though it's, we're bordering on some sort of constitutional crisis here. But if for example, to begin with, if they had the least bit of planning and competence in the organization, and they're figuring out between November and January, between January and now, what are the steps they want to take to, make a successful administration, even if you do want to cover up for your own Russia collusion shit, you should fire Comey at the very beginning, use the explanation that, that Rosenstein and Sessions are pushing now, and you come off almost as like bipartisan. It would sound like, hey, I'm a new president, and I acknowledge that even though I won, there were some problems that happened in the election, and the FBI could use a change in order to restore our faith in law enforcement and what have you. But no, they're just they trip over themselves.
Well, the other theory could be that Trump got the message, the bat signal from Putin to say, no, just fall on the sword here, okay, and blame it on yourself. Because then, and I know you wanted to cover this, didn't Trump have some unusual visitors to the Oval Office just, moments after he fired James Comey this week?
Right. So yeah, that was a separate thread of the story that we didn't get to at the beginning, but it was the day after he fired Jim Comey. Just by coincidence, Sergei Lavrov, and Sergei Kislyak, the Sergeys, came.
And did they have what's his name? Who's that hockey player? Sergei Lavrov.
Sergei Fedorov.
Sergei Fedorov
also was there.
Yeah, Sergei Fedorov was there, and they had the Russian. So yeah, they met in the Oval Office, and the official photographer for the Russian ambassador was there, but there was no American press there. So, well, clearly, so we heard about the fact that Sergei Kislyak was there through Russian state media. That's where we've arrived, guys. Is we now need to get our news about American government through Russian state media.
Yeah, and what were they discussing? Can we ponder for a moment? Like, what were they possibly discussing the day after Trump fired Comey,
They're all of them actually. Well, Kislyak and Trump in particular are portly fellows. They might have been discussing, the weighing whether to wear suspenders versus a belt, that sort of thing. It's and probably preferences in urinating prostitutes.
Yeah, exactly. How to best prime the pump, But what were they actually discussing? I mean, because a part of me, if I can postulate a conspiracy theory here, is that Trump went off the rails here, fired Comey on a whim, and the Russians are nervous because they are complicit in this. They know they're part of this investigation, and they know that it's possible that this is going to bring the whole White House down. They spent a lot of money and a lot of effort to put into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So it's possible they went in there. The Russians went in there at the behest of Putin to play damage control.
I think it's actually another when we're discussing incompetence versus malice. This might be another incompetence moment where these types of meetings probably take quite a bit of planning in advance. So they might have been set to meet on what was it, the May 10th or something. And they might have just penciled that into the calendar a month ago or something, and then Trump was an idiot and issued this firing the day before, not realizing the optics of what's going to happen the next day.
But then why didn't they have Tillerson in the room? So Lavrov was there to visit with Tillerson. Okay, so Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, was in Moscow a month before, and they gave a press conference when Lavrov got here, saying, "Oh, we're here to continue the dialogue that we started in Moscow last month." Okay, right. And then he has the ambassador and the foreign secretary of Russia into the Oval Office, and doesn't have our own Secretary of State in there. Okay, that's some shady shit right there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then the fact that they have their photographer in there who has a whole bunch, bags and bags of photography equipment. How easy would it be to just drop a tiny microphone like under a plant or a desk or something, and then everything that Trump says is recorded by the Russians? Yeah,
and I think the administration even admitted, or some official from the administration mentioned that they didn't realize that this the photographer that was brought in was like state media. I think the quote was, "They tricked us." Like there's literally potential Russian espionage going on in the Oval Office, and the administration is just shrug emoji at this point.
Yeah, that makes you feel real confident, right?
Yeah. And who is going to replace Comey at the FBI? Can we just, because obviously the part of the reason why this is a story here that Lavrov and Kislyak were in the Oval Office the day after he fired Comey, but who's in the cards to replace Comey? Do you guys know? Is there who?
I'm on Team Chris Christie.
Team Chris Christie.
I heard a couple names. I saw a couple names floated on Twitter, and Marco Rubio was like, I would support Trey Gowdy or Texas. John Cornyn. Yeah.
Oh, Trey Gowdy.
Oh, yeah. Trey Gowdy is the worst. I saw a funny. Actually, this was, I think, posted on Democratic Memes. Somebody said in a comment like, Trey Gowdy looks like if a person or if a Klan hood became a person.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. When a Klan hood becomes a human, when you personify a Klan hood, you get Trey Gowdy. Okay, that's of course the followers of Democratic Memes, they know what's up.
Yeah, that was a great analogy. So let's move on to another nugget of information that came out of the Lester Holt interview. So as I mentioned earlier, there was a weird sentence that was included in the termination letter where Trump said to Comey, thanks for telling me on 3 different occasions that I wasn't under investigation, which just kind of jumps out at you. It's like, that has nothing to do with why he was fired. Why does that belong in a termination letter? So Lester Holt asked Trump about this, and Trump kind of explained the 3 times. But the first time is the most interesting one. It's he said they had a dinner together, Trump and Comey. Trump, of course, framed it as if Comey asked Trump for the dinner in order to try to save his job, and this is in Trump's explanation, and Trump said that at that dinner he asked Comey. He said, if you could you tell me if I'm under investigation? And I guess Comey said no, or that's what Trump claims. Now, this same dinner has been discussed a number of times by Comey sources. So there's another side of the story, and actually, this side of the story is easier to believe because we have a James Clapper as a source, not an anonymous source. He's confirming that this dinner happened, and that he said today on Jake Tapper's show that Comey actually told him that he felt uncomfortable about the dinner. He felt it could be seen as compromising the independence of the FBI. And then he said, and then other sources, this is not coming from James Clapper. James Clapper doesn't know what actually happened at the dinner, but other sources have said that, and these are anonymous sources, so a bit harder to believe, but they said that Trump pressed Comey for loyalty, basically saying, can you be loyal? Can I trust you to be loyal to me? And Comey declined at that dinner.
That's how he wanted. That's the only way he was going to let Comey keep his job. And he thought that he could legitimately make the FBI director a thief. Okay, a serf, one of his serfs. Okay, and this is at the time when Trump was having dinners with a lot of his, a lot of people. Right? Remember the infamous Romney dinner where he probably asked Romney for fealty as well. So Tim, you're right. You're right. That story gives you goosebumps, guys. That's actually happening in our democracy.
Yeah, we're entering it's like game story here, where some evil lord is asking for fealty from a potential adversary, and then if they decline based on moral principle, it's like, nah, fuck you, off with your head.
Yeah, and I sorry.
This kind of reminds me of like where Trump came from, and like his mentor back in the 80s was like he was kind of like mob affiliated back in the 80s, and this is like the mob mentality, right? Like loyalty comes above all other things. Like you must pledge your loyalty to me, or else you're gone. And that's just, it seems like that's the way Trump operates. Like he has this kind of idea about like how business is done, but it's not real. It's like from mob movies, I'm pretty sure.
He thinks he's the Godfather.
He does.
He thinks really he's the Godfather. This is just so unsettling. And for me, I just, it's another attempt for Trump. Trump pulls the classic, and you remember this from the Republican debates. It's like an elementary school style tactic where he calls you like fat, and you're like, no, you're fat, right? Or and you just try to like throw back at them the same insults that. So Trump is just trying to basically, if Comey is allegedly leading an investigation against Trump, that he's doing something illegal, he's like, well, actually, Comey, you did something illegal because I have you on videotape telling me 3 times that I'm not under investigation, and you're not allowed to do that. So he's just trying to further justify the firing and just throw more shade on Comey.
Right. So that's a great point, Tarek, and that brings me to like the next big event here, which was basically there's been back and forth between Comey and Trump. I mean, Comey has been not speaking directly to the press yet, but things have been leaking out from sources close to Comey, and so one of the big things that you just mentioned was Trump saying, basically threatening Comey, saying, I hope you better hope there's no tapes of the conversations that we had, implying that he can prove that whatever Comey is leaking right now is false, and that actually Comey, that something else actually happened in those conversations. And through his leaks, Comey has sort of responded, and I'm not sure if we can trust these leaks, but the leaks have been saying that Comey's not worried about the tapes, basically. And also the other big piece of news here is, or something I just want to point out, is that Trump has been trashing Comey, like, on Twitter and in this Lester Holt interview. So I'm just wondering, like, do you guys think that Comey is going to get his revenge? Like, what do you think?
Well, yeah. So I'll say that my hunch with Trump's tweet talking about tapes, quote unquote tapes, it was in quotation marks. That my hunch is that that's bullshit. Like, Trump he's a bluffer, and he'll say anything, and he's a serial liar. So the idea that, like, yeah, exactly. The idea that, like, wait, he came into the White House 3 months ago and installed, like, wiretapping for his own conversations, and given the fact that we just had this whole discussion about a month or two ago about, did Obama wiretap him? I think it's just a fantasy in Trump's head, but he was using that for, like, bluffing purposes. It's possible that, yeah.
That's the best point right there, Rahul. Sorry to cut across you, but the fact that he accused Obama of wiretapping him, and then he's over here, like, basically saying, "Yeah, I wiretap people too."
Yeah, but I think that's bullshit. Like, anything he says yesterday is not precedent for today. It's all just a swirl of nonsense.
Yeah. Right.
I think it's just meant to be like a negotiation point where he's just saying, like, "Oh, Comey, you scared of me now? I'm gonna release some tapes," and then Kobe's probably not scared of that shit.
Right. So yeah. So let me mention how Comey has been responding. Another thing that came from his sources is that he was invited to testify privately in front of the Senate Intel Committee on this coming Tuesday. He declined that invitation, and he didn't say publicly why he declined, but sources are indicating that he declined because he wants to testify publicly.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that really made me think, I wonder if Comey has something interesting here. And for example, if Comey says, yes, Trump pressed me for loyalty in this dinner, and it made me feel uncomfortable, that's pretty incriminating at that point. And then it becomes Trump's word versus Comey's word. And I feel like Comey wins in the court of public opinion between Trump's word and Comey's word. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think you're right, but at the same time, for me, this whole thing about loyalty is unsettling, but it's not the real story. The real story is how far down the Russia rabbit hole was Comey at the time when Trump fired him. Because what I would really like to hear Comey say is that, yeah, we have a sealed indictment against Trump in one of the cases that are the grand jury cases that are happening right now in Northern Virginia. But that's what I'd love to hear Comey say if he does testify. Like, for me, it's less important this, like, sort of backstory, what's happening there. If he does testify publicly, I want to know what goods does he actually have on Trump.
Yeah. So the sealed indictment thing. So did you hear about that on Twitter? Because I heard about that. There were some sources, like, it was that what's her name, Louise Mensch or something, the British reporter. Have you heard of her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she and some other guy on Twitter said that there's a sealed indictment against Trump, and I don't know if I really believe it. It seems too good to be true, and they're saying that it's like they're going to use this as the basis for an impeachment or something. But
yeah, I got to be honest. Like Louise Mensch shows up on, like, Bill Maher's show every now and then, and I think she's a good commentator, but she also is very conspiratorial about like Russia stuff to the point where I have to dismiss some of it. Like I'm not sure. So there
Right.
have been the
But
subpoenas for documents from Michael Flynn and whatnot.
yeah, yeah.
I'm honestly not confident. If we're talking end games here, I'm really not confident in an impeachment as a concept. It might just be more that we keep the pressure going with investigations. If we take back the House in 2018, being able to press on it more and just shift public opinion to against the administration.
We have to
Yes.
impeach him. I disagree. We have to get him out of there. We absolutely have to impeach him.
Wait, so let me-
Impeachment in the Senate requires 67 votes.
If your skin is bleached, you must be impeached. Okay, as Johnny Cochran said. Okay, so you got to get him out of there.
So Tarek, I don't fully agree with the idea that the Russia investigation is the thing to take him down with. I actually think this obstruction of justice thing might actually be more of a grand slam case. I mean, he admitted in an interview, like these quotes in interviews are pretty damning. So I don't know. I'm kind of hopeful that there might be something might come out of this.
But like one thing that's like a difference between the Watergate era, which was also kind of an obstruction of justice type situation, and now is that the Congress, GOP controlled, the same party as the president, is not willing to do anything. And honestly,
Okay.
they don't give a fuck. So
Okay, you're right.
I don't even know if an obstruction of justice, pressure or the concept, pressuring Congress will lead to much. I hope there is.
You're right. Okay, I got one for you. So you're right about the current GOP Congress are not willing to do anything. I got an analogy for you because you brought up Watergate. So apparently, obviously, impeachment happens actually in the House, as everyone knows. The House of Representatives vote to impeach. You're not the vote to remove from office happens in the Senate. And in 1974, okay, so this was 2 years after Watergate actually happened, the break-in happened. And there were 11 Republican senators that said that they would not vote to remove Nixon from office. Okay, and you know what swung the vote there? Does any of you guys know? The
Nope.
tapes, the White House tapes came out where Nixon was actually talking with his then chief of staff about how they were going to cover up the break-in. And then as soon as those tapes came out, those 11 Republican senators who, after all the evidence had already been out there, said, nope, not enough I'm not going to vote to impeach my president here. Then they all ceremoniously switched their votes. So I agree with you that right now they're not willing to do it. They're not willing to do it. There aren't enough votes for impeachment in the House. There aren't enough votes to remove from office in the Senate. But that can change very quickly, as we saw with Watergate.
Yeah, I agree. I think the idea of Trump taping every conversation in the Oval Office or on his phone, that's just hard for people to support. I mean, given what happened with Watergate, and I would point out that I also want to point out separately that I think there's potential for an FBI investigation into obstruction of justice too, which doesn't require Congress. That's where I think the check on Trump is going to have to come from, because Trump has so thoroughly disrespected the FBI and its head, who is respected by the rank and file of the FBI, that they're gonna be mad, and it's gonna be hard for them to be. I mean, I hope they maintain like the appearance of being unbiased and are actually unbiased, but Trump has really bitten the hand that fed him here and burned some major bridges. So it'll be interesting to see how the FBI responds, I think.
Could I mention one thing on the wiretapping though? So because apparently, because I agree with you, Rahul, Trump's a bullshitter. He could very well be bluffing here that there are no tapes, and there are no tapes. But apparently there was I don't know if you saw, there was this BuzzFeed story that sort of recirculated here from July of 2016, where apparently sources say that Trump regularly would wiretap and listen in on phone calls at Mar-a-Lago. Did you guys hear about this story?
I did hear
Yeah,
about that.
yeah,
So
I heard about that.
he's a perv, man. Like
He's a
apparently,
perv, and
yeah.
he's paranoid and stuff like that. I get that. The thing that I am super doubtful of, even given his tendencies at Mar-a-Lago or his own properties, is within 3 months of his administration, did he really like set up like an elaborate recording scheme? And I don't even think he did that. He was mostly golfing the whole time and just like patting himself on the back, congratulating himself for eking out an electoral college win.
Right, and I think whether there are tapes or there aren't tapes, the outcome is bad for Trump, because if there's no tapes, it's just
Yeah.
Comey's word versus Trump's. If there
Yeah.
are tapes, then who do you think is more likely to have said something incriminating on the tapes between Trump
Yeah.
and Comey?
Oh my God, those tapes would be amazing because as Tark alluded to, the Nixon Oval Office tapes, they're just full of gold about how bigoted Nixon was. Like talking
Yeah.
about the Jews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like imagine how funny the Trump tapes would be in a future where he gets, assuming he gets impeached and then he becomes a laughing stock in history, then those tapes will be very funny to listen to.
Trump doesn't have a good track record with tapes. Okay, there's the Access Hollywood tapes. Okay, and then there's
PP
the
tape.
infamous PP tape. Okay, so Trump doesn't. You're right, Tim. Trump. It's a lose for Trump. By the way.
All right, so let's move on to what happens next. What would you guys see as a good next step? What do you want Democrats to do right now? Ask for a special prosecutor or a special commission, or another thing I thought of was pushing to keep McCabe as the head of the FBI, since he's kind of like a pro-Democrat guy. The other idea I've seen mentioned on Twitter and elsewhere was Merrick Garland as head of the FBI.
Oh God, Merrick Garland. Yeah, see, I feel very strongly about what should happen now. I agree that there needs to be a special prosecutor because the investigation in the House and the Senate is going absolutely nowhere. And there are stories that in the Senate there aren't even like full-time staffers that are working on this. So they're like vacant positions there. So their intent is for it to go absolutely nowhere. So there should be a special prosecutor appointed. I do think they should keep McCabe, but more importantly, I think in terms of what Democrats should do here, and I know I mentioned this to you guys in our thread. I think Democrats need to signal some significant action here, and they need to effectively shut down the levers of our government until Trump is impeached or we get a special prosecutor, or like we cannot allow this administration and this GOP Congress to parade themselves as legitimate when they're absolutely not. So, and I know that this view got a lot of support on Democratic memes this weekend. So I think a lot of our listeners might agree with that, but I'm not saying government shutdown, but I think attach an amendment to every single piece of legislation that the Republicans try to put forward that calls for a Trump impeachment, and let them vote against that every single time. It's like the Obamacare repeal efforts under Obama.
Yeah, like I do think that attaching, trying to attach some action to any piece of legislation moving forward probably is a good idea for the Democrats, just to keep the attention going, hammer it home. The thing I want to call attention to that I think tactically is kind of a little confusing, complex thing is the value of the special prosecutor versus like when you have a nonpartisan commission or independent commission or a group of nonpartisan experts to basically analyze this stuff over thoroughly. There was a piece in the Atlantic by a Republican writer, David Frum, who's a George W. Bush guy, not a friend of the pod, but it raised some good points about what are the duties of a special prosecutor in as they're defined very strictly, because lawyers have very strict kind of jurisdictions or you know topics they need to analyze, whereas some of these committees can be a little broader and bring more information to the public. And special prosecutors, the problem with them is just like the difficulty there is that they're searching for what is the criminal malfeasance of a given action by the administration or whoever they're investigating, and sometimes that might not turn out as it's not as broad of a scope as some of these committees and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so we might find that like some lower level lackey actually did commit perjury under oath or something, or Carter Page or someone didn't disclose information that he should have. And then once they've figured that out, it's just they wipe their hands clean and it's like, all right, well, it's, that's all I was asked to do. Just figure out who committed a crime.
And they could become this. You're right. They could become the story themselves, like Ken Starr in the Clinton impeachment, right? Like the story became that guy like was incompetent and had it against Clinton the whole time.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. I will say though. So Ken Starr is a good example. He did get to the bottom of what happened between Clinton and Monica Lewinsky.
Blue dress.
Like we know exactly what happened. There's not a lot of questions.
He found out what went down. Oh, or who went down. Okay, too soon.
But
too soon.
But yeah, so I think we have to look to past presidents and past administrations to see what has worked, right? Like we need to look at precedents to see like how has a commission worked? What types of problems do commissions work well for? Like we had the most recent commission I can think of is the 9/11 one, probably, which came up with a big report on 9/11, which seems fine. But it seems to me like when there's wrongdoing by the president, generally the way we've done it in the past is by hiring an independent prosecutor like Ken Starr or the guy who got fired by Nixon. I forgot what his name was.
Archibald Cox.
Cox.
Right. So like those are the two big like precedents for impeachment slash resignation by a president. Like how do we get that to happen?
And Archibald,
I would look to those examples.
You're right, and Archibald Cox was actually the guy. So remember I mentioned the tapes that swung the 11 senators in the Watergate era? Archibald Cox, even though he got fired, one of the things that he did successfully was he actually subpoenaed the tapes. So that's how the tapes got out.
Okay. Yeah, so there you go. I mean, that in that case, you just need one individual to decide to subpoena something. You don't need a whole committee to decide. So in that way, it could potentially go faster. I'm not really sure. Now, the other thing I would mention is what I hope happens is that the FBI investigation is not impeded, because they've been working at this since last July. So I don't want that investigation to stop. But if Trey Gowdy is put in place as the director of the FBI, that investigation basically means nothing to me at this point, or at least anything they say publicly, unless it's coming from like one of the underlings. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so the thing that actually made me feel a little more optimistic in the week was I forgot which publication produced this, but I was reading an article about how the way the FBI is structured, sure, like from top down, if it was Jim Comey or let's say it's Trey Gowdy or fucking Rudy Giuliani or whoever, they do have like top down pressure, but these cases are assigned to teams and they're basically supposed to doggedly go after the case, through whatever means necessary. Or like they basically these FBI case agents, they weren't the ones that were fired. They're still working on the Russia collusion investigation, but I mean, we'll see what the results are. And if, let's say, Trey Gowdy is appointed FBI director and he tries to influence what the results of these other guys are, these are still like basically like full-time hard-ass cops that are assigned to a case, and they're usually like pretty dedicated to it. So I'm hoping that even with a new director that's going to be a Trump lackey for most likely, that there's still some activity boiling below the surface that could result in some interesting findings from people that we don't know their names.
Right. Yeah, I hope so. I just think if the FBI, if Trey Gowdy is the director of the FBI, which makes me laugh every time I say it,
the clan hood,
then and the FBI, the result of the investigation is that there was no wrongdoing. Would you believe that? I would say no.
No, absolutely not. We can't trust this guy.
Right.
No, definitely.
Yeah. So I hope they find another solution.
And this is so fundamentally different than Benghazi as well. Like, I don't want to go on a tangent here because I know we want to get to Clown of the Week.
Benghazi,
but
never forget.
Never forget. Hashtag never forget, because the difference between the two is that Benghazi, there was a terrorist attack that happened, and they were trying to pin nail Hillary to the cross by saying that she. What did they say? That she told the troops, the Marines, to stand down. Okay, but she didn't instigate Benghazi. So if the key event in Benghazi was a terrorist attack, the key event here is collusion with a foreign adversary to undermine U.S. democracy. Okay, and that's what we're trying to nail Trump on. So Hillary had no control over a terrorist attack happening, and they were trying to crucify her for years with the Benghazi investigation. Saying happened here, what we know happened here, is that Trump colluded with a foreign adversary to undermine the U.S. democracy. So it's night and day.
Absolutely, it's apples and oranges. So let's move on to our favorite segment of the week, Clown of the Week.
Ooh, who's going down this week, guys? Who's that?
Guys, yeah, this is really like we're the premonition of Clown of the Week. It has real impacts on humanity. It turns out.
It seems like we have the ability to cast some sort of a strange curse on politicians. So let's take that responsibility very seriously. So who wants to begin?
I'll start with one that's, it's been a little dour thinking about how the checks and balances of our fragile democracy are crumbling, in front of our eyes. I think there's an amusing one this week. I'm going to nominate our Vice President, Mike Pence. To begin with, he was part of the administration cover-up in trying to justify Rod Rosenstein's explanation of the firing of James Comey, and he was contradicted by Trump. So, you look like a clown when your partner in crime is contradicting you anyway. But that's not the reason I'm bringing him up. I'm bringing him up because there is a tweet that's going viral as we speak. I guess Mike Pence was in Montana, and he tweeted with a horse, like I guess he was horseback riding or something, and he says in the tweet, "Outstanding afternoon," and quote, "I've often said there's nothing better for the inside of a man than the outside of a horse." And it's attributed to President Reagan.
Whoa.
So, I guess I get what he's trying to say, that horses are cool or something. But it sounds like he's saying nothing's better for a man than for a horse to fuck you. I don't know.
I don't know who Pence has a bigger hard on for here. Is it horses or Ronald Reagan with that quote? Because apparently Pence is a huge Reagan aficionado.
Oh yeah, exactly, and it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Let's not judge the bestiality community, guys. I mean, have you ever had a horse? Have you ever had a horse inside you before?
We're gonna get so many mentions. Just people are gonna be angry in the replies.
Yeah,
they're gonna
so many bestiality fans follow Democratic memes.
That's how you get that's how you get a colonoscopy in Montana. Apparently,
they call that a Helena enema.
All right, let's moving on. Tarek, what do you got for Clown of the Week?
Yeah, there were so many clowns this week. It was really hard to nail down. I'm gonna go with your boy Sean Spicy, aka Spicer, who
the Spice Man.
the Spice Man, who hid in the bushes this week, as the Washington Post reported, after Trump fired Comey, because there was absolutely no way for him to defend this in front
Wait,
of the.
Tarek, I need to issue a correction.
Okay,
The
okay.
Washington Post issued a correction saying that he hid amongst the bushes, not in the bushes.
Oh, okay. Amongst the bushes. That for me, that's a distinction without a difference. You know what I mean? So
That was at the urging of the White House. They
yeah.
were so upset by that story. They said, "You must correct this." It was amongst the bushes.
Amongst the bushes. But then apparently, didn't he also say that you could take a video, but it has to be in the dark? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
He's like,
Like,
no lights. You can take the video, no lights, and of course that made him look even weirder because he's just standing in the dark amongst the bushes.
That was foreplay for Spicer, because Sean also never has the lights on when he has sex, because he knows that will anyway. But the point here is that Spicer is going to be replaced, and SNL had a great segment on this last night or 2 nights ago, where they had Melissa McCarthy as Spicer, hiding in the bushes, amongst the bushes, if you want to, while Sarah Huckabee was giving the press briefing. Sarah Huckabee is an absolute clown as well. So there's nothing to look forward to here. I would rather have Spicer keep his job, so that Melissa McCarthy could keep her job on SNL. Although she could probably play a mean Sarah Huckabee.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I would point out that I heard that Trump was considering some like Fox News producer as his new press secretary. Did you hear that?
I did hear that, and that's the way to save your fledgling administration, by bringing in the geniuses at Fox News. They're probably going to put some 6-foot blonde with a miniskirt up there. That's what the producers are going to say.
So I'd read about this. You're wrong. 6-foot brunette.
Oh, you're right.
Nice. All right, dude. I like it. That's a good clown of the week entry. I'm gonna go with Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. Now we have to go kind of easy on this guy. He has to answer to Jeff Sessions, unfortunately. But supposedly he's a man of great integrity, or at least he was before this week. He was the guy who wrote the letter explaining that the reason Comey had to be fired was because of how he handled the Hillary email scandal in last year's election, which obviously makes no sense because that was the very thing that got Trump elected, right? So why would Trump be so upset about that? And he's praised Comey on a number of occasions for that decision that Comey made, to send that letter and basically ruin the election for Hillary. And I also want to point out that when Trump came a calling to Sessions and Rosenstein saying, "Hey, can you please write these letters for me so I can use it as justification to fire Comey?" Rosenstein was initially upset, according to sources, and actually even threatened to resign, supposedly. But apparently he eventually buckled to the pressure, and he assisted in firing Jim Comey, and what I would consider to be an assault on democracy. So at this point, I've lost all respect for this guy. I didn't have any respect for him before because I didn't know who he was, but I think I can declare him clown of the week.
Yeah, because he really did us a favor there by not taking the fall for the Comey firing, even though he enabled the firing by writing the letter. So
and I would add that after writing that letter, how was he repaid by Trump? By Trump contradicting him a day later in an interview with Lester Holt, making him look like a complete fool.
Yeah, like anyone who seems possibly reasonable within the administration, they just get, thrown under the bus immediately. And even if the idea that James Comey mistreated the Hillary Clinton email situation is true, and it seems reasonable to me, uh, he didn't realize that he was playing himself by, just going along with what the administration wanted to do more broadly.
Rod Rosenstein, you played yourself.
Played yourself.
Played yourself.
All right. Are we in agreement? Clown of the week?
Clown of the week. There he
Clown
is.
of the week.
He's gone. He's gone next week. Madden curse, in effect.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll. Well, what bad could befall Rod Rosenstein, though? He's not. It's not like he's going to get fired by Trump or Sessions. So I'm concerned that this is going to affect our Madden curse record. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, he could just resign anyway because he's.
That's true. He was threatening to resign, and that's how Nunes went out.
Yeah, and that's how back in Watergate, the famous Saturday Night Massacre, it was principled people in the Justice Department resigned over basically a crazy order from Nixon. Nixon wanted to fire the prosecutor, Archibald Cox, and then the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General both resigned because they were like, I will not process this order. And then they got third in line, and it was the later to be known as a racist Supreme Court nominee, Robert Bork, who was finally the guy that raised his hand and said, I'll do this. I'll process
he was the Solicitor General, I believe, at the time.
Solicitor General, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, hey, Rosenstein, if he's principled, he might be gone next week.
All right. Let's hope for it.
Well, we will not be gone next week because we will be back with another hard-hitting episode of Radio Free USA. And I might be coming to you, actually, from another undisclosed location, potentially a bunker fire, guys. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, getting deported again.
So inconvenient, the constant deportations.
I know exactly. Exactly. I probably will be in Singapore next week, actually, during our recording. So we'll see how that one goes, guys.
Well, it's been another great week of Radio Free USA. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
See ya.